Barakim Habarim, welcome to Messianic Moment Ministries. I'm Stephen Bruck, and you know who you are on this 22nd day of July, 2021. Well, the answer to the question, are cheeseburgers kosher, is a resounding no, and a resounding yes. If you ask any mainstream Jewish person, their answer will be no, because their rabbi has taught them that any mixture of dairy and meat consumed within a certain number of hours is a sin. The time between eating one and the other is going to be different depending upon whether you are a Sephardic or an Ashkenazi Jew. Now, if you ask a Christian, born again or not, they will tell you it is a sin, but only for the Jews, because Christians are under grace and the need to obey the Mosaic laws is done away with when you accept Jesus as your Messiah. Lastly, if you ask me, I will tell you that it is not a sin to have a cheeseburger, because all God told us, which is in Leviticus 11 and a few other places within the Torah, is that we are not to boil a calf in its mother's milk. There is nothing at all anywhere in the Torah that says you cannot have dairy and meat together. That is strictly a Talmudic requirement. If you aren't familiar with the Talmud, it's considered by many Jews, especially within the Orthodox sects, to be as important as the Torah. This is because the Talmud is called the oral law, which is the many other commandments God gave to Moses that were not written down, but instead passed orally from Moses to Joshua and so forth down through the centuries, until it was finally written down in the Mishnah, which was composed circa around 300 CE. Later, the Gemara was added, that was around 500 CE. And there are two separate Talmuds. There's the Babylonian Talmud and the Palestinian or Jerusalem Talmud. The Talmud contains halakha, which means the walk or the way to walk, which is how Jews are to worship and live their lives. Everything from how far you can walk on Shabbat, to what kinds of dishes to have, to how hot your dishwasher has to be, to what lights to leave on Friday before Shabbat, to what you can wear, to how to groom yourself to. Well, you get the idea. So if Jews say cheeseburgers aren't kosher, and Christians say kosher isn't required for people who believe in Jesus, why do I, a Jew who believes in Jesus, say that cheeseburgers are kosher and the kosher laws are still required? I'll tell you why. Because God never said, don't mix dairy and meat together in the same meal, and Yeshua never said any of the Mosaic laws, which include the kosher laws, he never said any of those are no longer necessary when you follow him. Let's set this straight. I do not condone or even suggest that we should change God's commandments because of the difference between how people lived then and how we live today, but rather that we should know how they lived then and account for how we live today to ensure we follow not just the letter, but the spirit of the law. God was clear when he spoke through the prophets that he wants obedience, but obedience from a desire to please him and not as a means of earning salvation. In other words, just going through the motions, what we call legalism, is not enough. I say cheeseburgers are kosher because when we consider what the culture and society were like when God gave that command, we know that back then you most likely owned the cow that gave the milk and birthed the calf. So you knew which calf belonged to which cow and which cow gave what milk. Knowing who belonged to whom, you could easily avoid using the milk that came from the calf's mother to cook that mother's calf. God only knows why he gave this specific commandment, but it seems obvious there is a spiritual importance to what God said. To me, this clearly indicates some relationship with child sacrifice and the hideousness of parents eating their own children, which is often brought up as the epitome of horror that resulting from being under siege. Maybe being under siege doesn't have to relate only to being surrounded by an enemy, but to being surrounded by sin, such as when we live in a sinful and fallen world. So, back to the cheeseburgers. The meat in the cheeseburger comes from the beef industry, and the milk comes from the dairy farm industry. These are two totally different animals, pardon the expression, and in dairy farming, the cows aren't killed unless they are no longer able to produce milk, and that is in part of the beef industry. Calves are born in both the beef and dairy industries, but they stay within that industry. To violate the kashrut, which means kosher, commandment regarding boiling the calf in its mother's milk, you would have to buy milk from the grocery store that was from the same cow that gave birth to the veal you bought from the grocery store, then boil that veal in that milk. Well, the milk production from United States dairy farms is about 21 billion gallons a year. And the meat Americans eat is not mainly from America, but the top 4 producers of meat sold in America are Japan, South Korea, Mexico, and Hong Kong. Considering these statistics, it seems pretty safe to say that there is no way in the world that anyone would ever be boiling a calf in its mother's milk. Unless you own the cow and did it all on purpose. So, there you have it. If you want to live rabbinically kosher, obeying what men say, which overrides what God said, then you will never eat any dairy with any meat product ever. At least you won't be sinning. Or you can ignore the kosher laws altogether, as Christians have been taught they can do, thereby always sinning. Not just by violating the cow milk calf thing, but by pigging out on pig and having a shell of a time eating shellfish. There is a third option. You can do as I do and be biblically kosher, eating what God said is okay to eat and not eating what God said is not okay to eat. Look, this ministry is not here to tell you what you should do, but to teach you what you need to know in order to make an informed decision. And now that you have been informed, well, it's up to you to decide what you will do. However, in any case, thank you for being here, and please share these messages with everyone you know to help this ministry grow. Please also subscribe to the YouTube channel using the icon down here in the corner, and on the website using the subscribe button in the right hand margin. These are different lists, so subscribe to both, please. And don't forget also, while you're on the website, check out my books, and you can also check out my Facebook page. And remember that I always welcome your comments. Well, that's it for now. So, Litrot and Baruch Hashem.